Larmer. Now, Glen is an old mate from radio sport days. When we began that station, April the 6th, 1998, Glen was doing the night show, I think it was, back then. Then he became producer for Brendan Telfer. And if you read Brendan Telfer's book, well, there's a chapter in there where there was an incident where a piece of equipment was thrown by one staff member at another staff member. It was a long time ago. We've always been great mates. We had a bit of a set to that day. We've been great mates ever since, though. Glen has been calling the Warriors for years. He's the voice that you hear if you're sitting at home or sitting in the pub listening to Sky Sport. And it's going to be fascinating listening to the man as his thoughts and impressions of not only this year, but also what he's witnessed over most recent seasons. Welcome to the show, mate.
Hey, Martin. Nice to chat to you, man.
How long have you been calling the Warriors now?
Oh, gee, that's a good question. Well, I missed a few years in the COVID years. I missed 2 years there. It must be 2017. I'd actually have to go back through my records, mate.
Right.
2017, 2016, somewhere around there.
Okay, I'm only asking you that because just to let the audience know that you have sat there doing this job during some of the grimmest times of all, including last year, 6 wins, and those awful post-match press conferences where Stacey Jones would sit there with his head in his hands and talk about no effort, no trying, no guts, no one wanted to play for the jersey, all of that. So you go from that, and then we start this year. What were your hopes for the team this year?
Look, I've got to be honest, mate. I didn't expect them to make the top 8. I thought they might contend for the top 8. But I made a prediction to a couple of mates, actually, mate. This is probably the best way to sum it up. I made a prediction about 2 months into the season with a couple of mates. I said that last game the Warriors will play in the regular season against the Dolphins. I said that game there, winner was going to go through to the top 8 and the loser was going to miss out on the top 8. So my expectations were in around there. I thought there were, 4 or 5 clear teams above the rest, and they'd finish. The Warriors weren't one of those teams, and then they would be battling for a place in the top 8. So that's kind of where my expectations were. And frankly, mate, if you put a gun to my head now and said, do you reckon they would have made the top 8 at the top at the start of the season? I went, nah, I wouldn't have.
No, look, I was the same. What I was hoping for under Andrew Webster was I was hoping for some starch, some staunch. I didn't want to see any more 40 or 50-point thrashings, and I was hoping that we might go 12-12 or 13-11 and be contesting for positions 8 and 9. I thought that's realistic.
That's right, and I knew when Webster signed it, they'd signed a good guy first of all, and a guy that wanted to be in New Zealand. And I think that's really important. If you want to get a coach of the Warriors that's coming from Australia, they've got to actually move here with their family. Now, Stephen Kearney didn't do that. Nathan Brown decided he didn't want that, so he went. So they got a guy who wanted to come to New Zealand and actually be in New Zealand, and I think it was a really good buy, mate. I mean, he was an assistant coach here before under Andrew McFadden. Andrew McFadden's back at the Warriors now in a high performance role, so there's a relationship there. They clearly got on well. There's a whole bunch of reasons why this potentially could work long term, but mate, I didn't expect it to work, or bounce back this fast. No one did. I said to Monty Beetham the other day, I said, bro, did you expect this to happen so fast? He went, no. I thought it was going to take 4 or 5 years for us to get back to this point. So that's kind of where we are. So great decision from Cameron George to go after him, and an even better decision for Webster to come over, mate.
Glen Larmer is with us. You hear his voice. He calls these games on Sky Sport with Monty sitting alongside and has done for years. And look, part of it to me was just also accepting what the reality of it was. We had essentially the same squad. A guy's going to come in and hopefully he can motivate, hopefully he can enthuse and inspire. But just in terms of this group of players being able to play at another level and keep that consistent, I think it's probably, past everyone's wildest dreams. But when I first met Andrew Webster, that very first press conference back in January, there's something really impressive about him. He was genuine, and that's the word you used as well there, Glen. And I really do think that, rather than have a blag merchant who's all puffing and telling you all kinds of stuff, you had a guy that to me looked as though he really cared about what he was doing. And as basic as that is, I think it's actually been hell influential.
Yeah, absolutely, and that stuff rubs off, you know. I mean, I think if I was a player there and I've got a coach standing in front of me who wants to be there, whose family's come over, as I touched on, then you're actually going to listen to him a bit more than some kind of fly-by-nighter that came in the last couple of coaches. So I think that is absolutely critical. Yeah, and isn't he a likeable guy, mate?
Yeah, he is.
He's just such the friendliest guy, but he's a very intelligent guy. He knows the game, and I think he's proven very quickly that he knows how to get the best out of each player. And I think it was amazing that he rang up each player individually after he got appointed and said to them, I believe in you, mate. You're in my team. Don't worry about it. But you're going to work hard. You're going to do this. We're going to work with you on this, blah, 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 blah. And off it went because, one of the reasons I didn't think they'd make the top 8 at the start of the season is, frankly, I didn't think the squad was strong enough,
Same.
Martin.
Yeah.
There's not enough good players. So, to go through that entire team and see what they've produced this year as individuals is it's amazing. And they've just gelled together so well. And, he's part of it. Andrew Webster, there's a number of other factors that go into it as well. But, amazing team performance. And that's what we saw again on Saturday night. It was a team performance, and fingers crossed it goes one more game this week,
Yeah, look, what impressed me the most about it was their ability to actually go up a level. And after the Penrith game, I mean, I was looking at that Panthers side and also the way that the Broncos dismantled the Storm in the opening round of the playoffs and thinking, these sides, this is playoff football. It's not regular season football. It's like a test match. As Monty said on the program before, you've got everything is faster, everything, your reaction time, your decisions have to be quicker. You can't make mistakes, all of that. Were we capable of doing that against a really quality side? And that was evidenced on the weekend. Going back to the start of the season, though, at what stage did you, because you're sitting there watching all of these games and you're talking to Monty, you're talking to these players, at what stage did you start thinking, heck, we might have something here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I first got the thought when they beat the Sharks, when they came back and won that game, from the dead, basically, in the wet, when Sean Johnson kicked that penalty to win the game. I thought maybe at that point, but even then, that was still quite early on, because then, we lost to the Roosters, and, and that was, even though it was only 14-0, it was a pretty comprehensive loss, that, and I thought, well, maybe they're still going to hover around the bottom 8. But then it all kind of started to, I looked at the draw, and after, with about 8 or 9 games to go, if you looked at that draw, you're thinking, actually, they could beat most of those teams, and they're going to win 14, 15 games. And so it kind of hit me about mid-season that they had an opportunity to get into a decent position in the playoffs, and that's exactly what happened. I mean, they got bonus wins during the Origin period over the Eels and the Sharks. I didn't expect them to win those games, and they won both of them fairly comfortably. So I think they've peaked for the games that they needed to peak. They kind of dropped away with that Dolphins performance at the end there, but they rested a bunch of players. And then, even though they got hammered by the Panthers, too, Martin, I think there were signs in that game where they actually showed some pretty decent resolve, and to give the fans hope they would bounce back on Saturday. So yeah, I would probably say about mid-season when they started in that Origin period, mate, when I thought they had a really good chance to get into the top 4. Yeah.
Glen Larmer is with us on the platform. He's an old mate. We started Radio Sport together as a journalist broadcaster from way back. So when you're actually at Mount Smart, and again, just tracking back through the last couple of seasons that you've been there, when crowds have been paltry, Glenn, you've had maybe 10,000 consistently on a good day. Some days you get between 6,000 and 7,000. They're just the absolute diehard fans. From that emptiness where the team's getting towelled and you're just sitting there thinking, my God, when is this ever going to change? From that to what you witnessed on Saturday night.
Yeah, amazing, eh? It's just been so cool to watch not only that crowd on Saturday, but all the crowds this year. They have been excellent, and I mean, I just think that comes down to a number of reasons, Martin. The first of which, I just think the Warriors get it. They've got a really good engagement strategy with their fans and the general public. I mean, the icing on the cake is that phrase "up the wires."
Yep.
That is the 3 words, just 3 words. Look how effective that has been for the club this season. Unbelievable. And that's taken the interest to another level. I mean, there were 700,000 people watching that game against the Panthers 10 days ago, mate, on telly. Yeah, it was live on free-to-air, so maybe there was an inflated audience there, but 700,000 watching the Warriors play that game. That's a massive audience for them. And it's just a different environment now, mate. I mean, but it's been so good since they came back last year. I remember that game vividly against the Tigers when they came back. You know, there were 25,000 people there that day. You know, there was a test match around that time as well. It was just so cool having a good vibe back there again. So, yeah, mate, and it's really just carried on. You know what I mean? So, I think it's going to be interesting next year now, even regardless of what happens this week, Martin, and if they win, they're going to the grand final. I think it's going to be interesting next year as well. How can they continue the momentum? You know, they've got a couple of new players coming in. Roger and Chanel are coming back. That's exciting. So I think we're going to get a fresh-looking Warriors next season as well to engage with everyone again, which is awesome.
And just in terms of, you know, I keep saying to people, look, if you're out there Saturday night, this is as close as we probably get in this country to an English Premier League match. Now, I'm not saying that's the gold standard, but it's the fun aspect I'm talking about, Glenn. So when you actually go to a game of sport live, you know, it's not a chore. It's meant to be something you enjoy. It's meant to be like a rock concert. You're meant to go along, see your favourite things, hear your favourite songs. You're meant to have a Yahoo. God, if you're of the age, you get your shirt off and throw it around. You're meant to behave like a child. It's actually meant to be all of those things. And I contrast that with what I see out at the Warriors compared to rugby and the NPC crowds aren't there, Super Rugby crowds aren't there, but even the All Black crowds, it's a different environment. It's a staid environment. And look, I'm not being down on rugby, but rugby's got to understand that, you know, the paradigm has shifted here, and it's got to just lighten the hell up and get some fun back, doesn't it?
Yeah. Mate, I don't get rugby at the moment, mate. I've got to be honest with you, mate. I've gone right off the sport. I find it a frustrating watch. It's just so slow, stop-start, too much kicking, referees prancing around, scrum resets. Why do I want to watch that when I can see the ball in play for about 70% of the game and people enjoying themselves watching it? You know, it's just chalk and cheese at the moment. I mean, why would you go to a rugby game at the moment to watch that? Seriously, why? I don't understand why you'd want to go. And I think the rugby union, seriously, mate, they must be burning through that Silver Lake cash like no tomorrow that they got last year or whenever it was, because they need to find very quickly, they need to find an engagement strategy with fans again, mate. And it's been a long time, really, since we had decent crowds at Super Rugby for a start, right? Long time. I mean, here's another example, mate. How many Samoan flags and Tongan flags are you seeing in Auckland on the back of cars at the moment because the Rugby World Cup is on? I'm seeing nothing. But I'll tell you something, when the Samoan league team come here in a few weeks to play the Kiwis at Eden Park, there will be Samoan flags everywhere, all across Auckland. And I think the Rugby Union have lost a lot of the Pacific Island support. They've all gone to Rugby League. Rugby League have nailed it with the way their eligibility works with Samoa, with the good players playing for Samoa and Tonga. It's revitalised the international game, and it's given people in South Auckland in particular something really meaningful, their team to grab onto, and we're not seeing that in Rugby Union. Far from, we've seen the complete opposite, mate, and I think it's fantastic.
Finally, I'll leave you with this. So I was at Auckland University last night, mate. My oldest Charlie, or our oldest Charlie, graduated with a Master's last night. Very, very proud of him.
Wow.
And
awesome. Congratulations,
man. Yeah,
man.
thank you so much. Well, congratulations to him. It's just life-changing. And as about 200 people before he got announced, and anyone that's been to these ceremonies, they seem to take forever. But as you know, the kids, or I call them the kids, as the children come across and they get their degrees, there's always a couple of family members and friends here who shout out a couple of things. Glenn, it took about 12 minutes before the first "Up the Wars" was shouted. Now, and the crowd erupted and loved it. And I was sitting there next to my ex-wife and friends, and I was sitting there thinking, I bet no one yells "Go the All Blacks" tonight. And if they did, everyone would feel weird about it if they did. And this is our national team, our national game. And that's the absolute tangible shift that's going on at the country. The Warriors have dialed up fun is what they have.
That's right, and I think adding to that too, Martin, is very little expectation about this All Blacks team at the moment, isn't there? I mean, no one's expecting them to actually seriously contend for the World Cup, and I think a lot of people, when they finally do get beaten in this World Cup, are going to go, oh well, we expected that. Ian Foster's gone, Scott Robertson's coming in. Well, we're actually looking forward to next year. So I actually think there's a lot of that going on at the moment. And again, that comes back to the rugby union that has allowed that situation to develop. And it's not good for New Zealand rugby. So, let's hope the Warriors can go over to Brisbane, mate. Win the game. Not going to be easy. Not going to be easy. In fact, I've got to be honest, I'd be surprised if they win the game. But, mate, they're a starter's chance. And if they get everything right and they get a few things going their way, mate, you never know what's going to happen. I always remember Jared Beale, who won a NRL championship with the Sharks. And I said, mate, why was it different this year? Why did you guys win it this year, not last year? And he goes, well, mate, we were injury-free and you need a lot of things to go your way. So if those things go the Warriors' way on Saturday, mate, who knows what might happen.